24 hours after my daughter spat in my face and called me a dirty old woman. She stood in front of an ATM in Columbus, watching the machine refuse her card. I wasn't there to see her expression when the screen showed access denied, but I didn't need to be. By then, I was miles away, breathing air that didn't carry her resentment anymore. The night before had started quietly. My name is Lilian. I have lived in the same small house in Clintonville, a neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, for more than 20 years. I bought it after decades of sewing for other people. First in factories and later from a machine near my kitchen window. It isn't a large house, but it has always been enough. That evening, we were celebrating my grandson Justin's birthday. He had turned 10 that week. The three of us sat at the kitchen table. Justin talked about a project from school while Ensley scrolled through her phone, barely listening. That had become normal lately. When Justin finished, I mentioned the letter the school had sent earlier that day, another reminder about tuition for the next term. Ensley slowly set her phone down. "You're always interfering in my life," she snapped. "You think money fixes everything." Justin stopped eating. Ensley pushed her chair back so hard it scraped the floor. She leaned toward me, and before I realized what she was doing, she spat in my face. "You dirty old woman," she said. "All you care about is money." Justin froze. He stared at both of us, confused and frightened. I didn't yell. I reached for a napkin and wiped my face. For a moment, I simply looked at Ensley. The hope I had been carrying for years quietly ran out right there at the table. It felt strange how calm that realization was. "I understand," I told her. Justin kept watching me, waiting for an argument or shouting. None came. The kitchen stayed silent, except for the refrigerator humming behind us. Later that night, after Justin went to bed and Ensley shut herself in her room, I sat alone at the kitchen table. For the first time in years, I stopped asking how to fix things for my daughter, and by the time I stood up from that chair, I already knew what I would do the next morning. That night I didn't sleep much. I stayed at the kitchen table, touching the napkin I had used earlier. Sometimes your hands keep moving even when your thoughts haven't caught up. I've spent 40 years sewing for others. After Ensley's father left, I took the first job I could find, factory rows and fluorescent lights. Later, I brought the work home, stitching late into the night so we could keep the house in Clintonville. I believed I was giving Ensley something solid, a place she could always return to. She did come back after her divorce with Justin and 3 suitcases. At first, things were fine. Then the small withdrawals started. 500 here, 800 there. At first I assumed they were things I had forgotten or bills she had paid while helping around the house. When I finally mentioned it, she gave a tired laugh. "Mom, relax. It's family money." Family money. I let those words settle without pushing back. Mothers tell themselves quiet stories. She just needs time. She'll figure it out. But the look on Justin's face at dinner changed that story. He had seen something a child shouldn't have to explain. I opened the drawer where I kept my bank statements and finally looked at the truth. The next morning, I opened the drawer where I kept my bank statements. I usually looked at them once a month, sometimes less. Retirement has a way of making you trust routines. My pension came in, the bills went out, and whatever remained stayed there. At least that was what I believed. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I noticed. The first thing I saw was the pattern. Small withdrawals. $500, $800, $1,000. None of them large enough to alarm the bank. None large enough to make me stop everything and investigate. Spread out over months, they looked ordinary. Together, they added up to something very different. I wrote the amounts down on a sheet of paper. The total sat there in front of me like something that had been waiting patiently for me to acknowledge it. Then I checked the account I had opened for Justin years ago. It was supposed to be his college fund. I hadn't touched it in a long time. When I checked Justin's education account more carefully, I saw it hadn't simply been left alone. Money had been pulled from it through transactions I never authorized. The account still showed a balance, but a meaningful part of what I had set aside for his future was already gone. My hands started shaking, though not from surprise, more from the quiet confirmation of something I had been avoiding. I searched the drawer again and found a folder Ensley had given me months earlier. Inside was a document with my signature on it, Financial Power of Attorney. I remembered that afternoon now, Ensley standing beside the table, flipping pages quickly. "It's just insurance paperwork," she had told me. "They need your signature." I signed where she pointed. At the time, I didn't read the details. That part was my mistake. The back door opened softly. Justin stepped into the kitchen. Still in his pajamas, he looked at the papers spread across the table. "Grandma," he asked quietly, "why does Mom get so angry when people talk about money?" I set the document down. "Sometimes people feel scared when they think they might lose control," I told him. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he should. After he left the room, I looked at the power of attorney again. What Ensley had done might have been dressed up as authorization, but that didn't make it proper. She had started treating access as ownership, and those are not the same thing. That assumption was about to change. Later that morning, I took the bus downtown. I brought the folder with the bank statements, the power of attorney form, and a few other documents I had gathered from the drawer. The ride into the city felt longer than usual, though that might have been my own mind working through the numbers again. Herrera and Bishop had an office on High Street. Daniel Herrera had helped me years ago when I bought the house. I remembered him as a patient man who explained things carefully. When I stepped into his office, he recognized me right away. "It's been a while," Herrera said. "It has," I replied, handing him the folder. He read quietly for several minutes. Every so often, he paused and adjusted his glasses before turning another page. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Your house still belongs entirely to you," he explained. "Your daughter doesn't have ownership rights. What she has is financial authorization through this document." He tapped the power of attorney form. "And that can be revoked immediately." I nodded once. Herrera studied me for a moment before continuing. "You should also know something else," he added. "When your daughter discovers this change, the reaction may not be pleasant. Are you prepared for that?" I considered the question. Not emotionally, practically. I raised her. I told him, "I know how she reacts when control slips." The corner of his mouth moved slightly, though he didn't laugh. "All right," he replied. "Then let's begin." Over the next hour, we worked through the steps. He prepared paperwork to revoke the financial authorization. We arranged for several accounts to require only my direct approval. He suggested transferring Justin's remaining education funds into a protected trust so no one else could touch it. Then he asked about my will. When I explained that Ensley was listed as the primary beneficiary, he raised an eyebrow. "That can be adjusted too." By the time we finished, a new stack of documents sat on his desk. As I gathered them, Herrera placed one final sheet in front of me. "If you're serious about separating your life from hers," Herrera said, "you should at least think through whether staying in the house still makes sense." I looked at the property records for a long moment. "Draw up the options," I told him. "I'm not promising a sale today. I'm promising I won't drift anymore." That evening I cooked dinner again. The routine felt almost ordinary. I boiled pasta, warmed sauce, and set 3 plates on the table. The kitchen smelled faintly of garlic and tomato, the kind of simple meal Justin usually liked. Ensley walked in halfway through and dropped her purse on the chair. "Long day," she muttered. Already scrolling through her phone, she sat down without looking at me. Justin arrived a minute later. He took his seat quietly, glancing once between the two of us before focusing on his plate. Ensley kept talking, mostly to the room. "My manager cut my hours again," she complained. "And the electric bill came today. Everything's getting ridiculous." I listened without responding. She noticed the silence after a moment and glanced up. What she asked. "You're not going to lecture me tonight. I don't plan to." I answered calmly. She shrugged and went back to her phone. Justin pushed his food around for a while before eating a few bites. The tension in the room sat there like an extra person at the table. Halfway through dinner, I slid a small, folded card toward him. "Keep this," I told him. He opened it carefully. Herrera had suggested that morning that I move all future contact to a number Ensley didn't know. I had set it up on the bus ride home. Justin looked up, confused. "Are you leaving?" "Just for a while," I replied, closing my hand gently over his. Ensley glanced up from her phone. "What are you two whispering about?" "School stuff," I answered. She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling. Later that night, the house grew quiet again. Justin went to bed first. Ensley shut her door not long after. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and wrote 3 letters. One for myself, mostly reminders about why I was doing this. One for Justin, and one for Ensley. When I finished, I left them neatly stacked in the center of the table. Then I packed a small suitcase and placed it beside the door. I left the house before sunrise. Justin was still asleep. Ensley's door was closed. I placed the 3 letters in the center of the kitchen table and carried my suitcase out quietly. The morning air felt cold against my face as I walked toward the bus stop. I didn't look back at the house. Later that morning, Ensley woke up. I learned the details afterward, piece by piece. She had planned to stop at the ATM on her way to work. It was something she did often, especially near the end of the month. The machine rejected the transaction twice. At the branch, the teller checked the account and told her the access attached to her authority had been removed. That was all the bank was willing to explain at the counter. A young employee checked the account and then looked back at her carefully. "Your authorization on this account has been revoked," the teller explained. "Only the account holder can access the funds now." Ensley stared at her. "That can't be right," she insisted. "My mother approved this." The teller kept her voice professional. "We received notice yesterday that your mother revoked the power of attorney on this account. As of now, only the account holder can authorize transactions. If you have questions, you'll need to speak with your mother or her attorney." Ensley didn't argue much longer. She left the bank and drove straight home. When she walked into the house, everything was quiet. My suitcase was gone. The bedroom door stood open. The kitchen table held only the 3 envelopes. She opened mine first. The letter was short. "You told me last night that all I care about is money. Now you will have the chance to live without mine." Ensley laughed when she finished reading. It was the kind of laugh people use when they still think the ground under them is solid. Then she started looking around the kitchen. The bills were still stacked beside the refrigerator, the rent payment she owed, the credit cards, Justin's school tuition notice. And slowly, the laughter stopped. For the first time in a long while, Ensley began to understand what her life looked like without my help holding it together. The first week after I left passed quietly. I stayed with an old friend named Teresa in Cincinnati. Her apartment sat above a small clothing boutique she helped manage. The space was modest, but she offered it without hesitation. "You can stay as long as you need," she told me the night I arrived. "I won't be much trouble," I replied. She waved that away. "You've spent 60 years taking care of other people. You can rest a little." The next morning, she asked if I would help with some sewing work downstairs. "Nothing complicated," she explained, "mostly alterations." That part felt familiar. I spent my days adjusting hems, repairing seams, and greeting customers who wandered into the shop. It wasn't a large place, but the rhythm of the work felt steady. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking up to tension inside my own house. Still, Justin stayed on my mind. Meanwhile, I began hearing bits of news about Ensley through messages she left on my phone. I didn't return them. The first few sounded angry. "You can't just disappear like this," she complained in one message. A week later, the tone changed. Creditors had started calling her. Without access to my accounts, the bills were stacking up faster than she expected. Not long after that, even the boyfriend she had introduced only months earlier stopped returning her calls. 2 weeks later, another message arrived. "You need to fix this," she insisted. "Justin and I are struggling." I listened to the recording once and then deleted it. A few days after that, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Ensley. Mrs. Ramsey, a calm voice, asked, "My name is Karen Ellis. I'm Justin's school counselor." I stepped outside onto the narrow back balcony before answering. "Is Justin all right?" "He's safe," Karen explained gently, "but he's become very quiet in class. His teachers noticed he's withdrawn. He asks about you often." I leaned against the railing, looking down at the alley behind the shop. Leaving the house had been necessary. I still believed that, but Justin was now standing in the middle of the space that decision created. A week later, after Karen Ellis said she was formally concerned about Justin, I returned to Columbus for a meeting at his school. Ensley walked in a few minutes later, her hair tied back in a hurry, and eyes looking tired in a way I hadn't seen before. "You really came back," she muttered. "I came for Justin." I replied. Karen was direct. She explained that Justin had become withdrawn, spending his lunches alone and asking about me every day. When Justin stepped into the room, he looked smaller than I remembered. He kept his voice low. "Grandma, if I stay with you, will Mom hate me?" I took a slow breath. "Your mother loves you, but she's having a hard time right now." After Justin went back to class, the atmosphere shifted. Karen closed the folder and met my eyes. "There may be another step we need to consider," she explained. Ensley stiffened. As Karen delivered the blow, Karen told us she was making a referral, so the situation could be reviewed formally. Within the next 2 weeks, my attorney filed in juvenile court for temporary legal custody, and the school records were submitted with it. 2 weeks later, we were in juvenile court for a temporary custody hearing. It was a small room inside the county courthouse in Columbus. Nothing dramatic about it. Just a judge, a clerk, and a few chairs arranged in front of a desk. Ensley sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. Justin stayed beside the counselor from his school. The judge reviewed the documents first. Karen Ellis had submitted reports about Justin's behavior at school. My attorney had included financial statements showing my retirement income and living situation in Cincinnati. The judge also had Karen Ellis's reports about Justin's withdrawal at school and the testimony about the instability inside the house after I left. Money alone was not the issue. The question was whether Justin had a consistent, emotionally safe place to live. The judge spoke calmly. "Ms. Ensley, your current financial instability raises concerns about providing a consistent environment for your son." Ensley crossed her arms. "I'm working on it," she replied. Things got complicated. The judge nodded, but turned toward Justin. "Justin, I need to ask you something simple," he explained. "Where do you feel safest living right now?" Justin looked at the floor first. Then he looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. His voice stayed quiet. "I love my mom," he said slowly, "but I feel safe with Grandma." The room stayed silent for a moment. Ensley's shoulders dropped slightly. She didn't interrupt this time. The judge wrote something down before speaking again. "Temporary legal custody will be granted to Mrs. Ramsey while Ms. Cole stabilizes her situation." Justin walked over to me when the hearing ended. Ensley remained seated for a moment longer, staring at the table as if the room had suddenly become unfamiliar. 3 years passed faster than I expected. Justin grew taller during that time. His voice changed, and his teachers began sending notes home about his grades instead of concerns about his silence. He spent afternoons at the boutique in Cincinnati after school, helping me fold clothes or carry boxes. The work gave him structure, and I could see the confidence slowly returning. Over time, Teresa asked me to take on more of the work downstairs. Eventually, Teresa and I formalized the arrangement. I wasn't just helping anymore. I was managing alterations, inventory, and part of the daily books. And she made me a partner in the business. Ensley's life changed too. It didn't happen quickly. She moved through a few unstable months first, and more than once it looked like she would slide backward again. But eventually, she found steady work as a medical receptionist and began attending therapy every week. One evening, she walked into the boutique near closing time. She stopped just inside the door. "Mom, I'm trying," she told me quietly. I studied her face before answering. I noticed the difference in her posture. Less anger, more uncertainty. "I see that," I replied. "Trust doesn't return all at once. It grows through smaller actions repeated over time." Justin stood near the counter watching both of us. I could feel how carefully he listened to every word. Later that night, while locking the shop, I thought about everything that happened. Sometimes love means stepping away instead of stepping in. I learned that some families can be repaired, not while only one person is doing the stitching. Ensley is working on herself now. But trust isn't a gift, it's an earned wage. So, I have to ask you, if your own child treated you like a paycheck instead of a parent, would you have the courage to walk away? Or would you keep paying for their disrespect? Let's talk in the comments.